All these lyrics going through my mind. Too much time on my hands. You know, all these different things we could talk about. Yeah, really good song.
Yeah.
You can break it down, right?
I am. This will spark a debate here talking about whether we should go to permanent daylight saving time, permanent standard time. But for now, we're sticking with changing those clocks twice per year, and that time change comes on Sunday morning when we get our sunsets to be an hour later in the evening. But of course, sunrises will also be an hour later in the morning time. So talking about the history of daylight saving time first, and then we'll look at how it would affect our clocks if we were to go to permanent daylight saving time or permanent standard time. So all the way back in 1784 with Ben Franklin, he jokingly recommended to get out of bed earlier to use daylight saving time to minimize the use of candles. But then 1895 comes around, George Hudson, an entomologist, he suggested to shift the clocks by 2 hours so that he would have more time to bug hunt. But nothing really was changed on a more regional basis for those two periods. You have to go into the First World War to see some actual change from regional and national perspective. So the German Empire in 1916 was the first to use daylight saving time to use less power and to save fuel for the war effort. And then the United States joined in 1918, but it only lasted for 7 months. Then in 1942, FDR reenacted daylight saving time, calling it wartime. That lasted from 1942 to 1945. So nothing that lasted for more than a few years until 1966. With the Uniform Time Act, that established the idea of daylight saving time. It would start on the first weekend of April and last until the last Sunday of October. So in 1974, daylight saving time was actually year-round for about a year because Congress wanted to conserve energy with the oil embargo. That didn't really work to save energy, but we did have it year-round for a brief period of time. In 1987, daylight saving time started the first weekend of April, and it went through the last weekend of October. That was used annually through 2006. And then in 2007, the start and end dates were changed a little bit, and this is what we use now, starting daylight saving time on the second Sunday of March and ending it on the first Sunday of November. But let's look at the actual effect of going to permanent daylight saving time or permanent standard time. Looking at the winter solstice and the summer solstice. I picked these two times because the winter solstice is the day we have the least daylight, we have our latest sunrise, earliest sunset, and we're on standard time at that point right now. For the summer solstice, we have the most daylight, earliest sunrise, latest sunset, and usually we're on daylight saving time at that point. So this is the current sunrise and sunset times for Bismarck. If we were to go to permanent daylight saving time, we would change the time frame in the winter, again skipping ahead an hour pretty much year-round. So you would adjust that sunrise on the shortest day of the year to be at about 9:30 in the morning, and our sunset would be at about 6 o'clock. If we were to go to permanent standard time, we would change mostly the summertime and have that, again, be on standard time year-round, moving the clocks effectively back an hour when we would be on daylight saving time that we've been used to for the past several decades. So our new sunrise would be 4:48 in the morning, and our new sunset on permanent standard time on the summer solstice would be 8:40 p.m. or thereabouts. For Minot, the times are pretty similar since we're at a similar longitude from Minot to Bismarck. These are the current sunrise and sunset times. Permanent daylight saving time. In the winter, again, shifting that sunrise to be pretty late in the morning. If we were on permanent standard time, we would, of course, be shaving some daylight off in the evening, not having a sunset after 9 o'clock like we usually do for a couple of months in the summertime. For our friends over in Williston, this is where things get even more tricky because you're on the far, far western side of the central time zone. So this is your current sunrise and sunset times for the winter solstice and the summer solstice. But If we go to permanent daylight saving time, check out that sunrise. About 9:45 in the morning, the sunset would be at 6 o'clock in the evening. If we were to go to permanent standard time, of course, your sunset, which is now when we're on daylight saving time, usually in the summer is close to 10 o'clock in the evening for a sunset. The sunset would be before 9 o'clock. That would be the latest sunset of the year in Williston, but the sunrise for permanent standard time on the summer solstice would be at about 5 a.m. So that's where a lot of people have issues with going to permanent daylight saving time, is that latest sunrise is very late in the morning on the western edge of the time zone. So in parts of central and western North Dakota that are in central time, having that latest sunrise, if daylight saving time is permanent, but be between 9 and 10 a.m. in the morning, and that would be in the winter time. So for example, Crosby, far northwest North Dakota, sunrise on the winter solstice, if daylight saving time is made permanent, wouldn't be until about 9:45 in the morning. So Dickinson, on mountain time, of course, things are different for mountain time being on the far eastern edge of that time zone for our friends in the viewing area in mountain time. These are your current sunrise and sunset times for the winter and summer solstice. But if we were to go to permanent daylight saving time, this is the new sunrise time, 8:30 in the morning and 5 o'clock in the evening for the winter solstice, and permanent standard time for the summer solstice. Look at that sunrise time, before 4 a.m. in the morning, and then the sunset time, if we were on permanent standard time for the longest day of the year, would be before 8 o'clock in the evening. So not having as much daylight in the evening and that sunrise very early in the morning. So there's been efforts to stop changing the clocks. I think that's what most people can agree on, is that we don't want to change the clocks twice a year. The controversy comes into play as if you want permanent standard time or permanent daylight saving time. So in 2022, the U.S. Senate unanimously approved the Sunshine Protection Act that would make daylight saving time permanent. It needs to be approved by the U.S. House still, and then signed by the President to become federal law. In 2025, so during this legislative session, the North Dakota House passed Bill 1259 that would make standard time permanent. That needs to be approved by the North Dakota Senate. So our governor said he would think it would be a little confusing for cities like Grand Forks and Fargo to have us be on standard time permanently. It would be better if neighboring states like Minnesota would also go to it. And it would also be confusing for that section of North Dakota in mountain time if we're always on standard time, but the sections in Montana and South Dakota that are on mountain time still change their clocks twice a year. So we need a little bit of consensus regionally as well as nationally. So the Federal Uniform Time Act of 1966 that we talked about earlier, that actually prohibits individual states from enacting permanent daylight saving time. That's why North Dakota House is going for the permanent standard time approach. Those states can choose to exempt themselves from observing daylight saving time entirely, like Arizona and Hawaii do. They stay on permanent standard time. They don't change the clocks twice a year. And looking across the globe, outside of North America and Europe, the practice of changing clocks twice a year is far less common. Roughly half of the world's countries once observed daylight saving time, but no longer do, with many countries changing their policies within the last decade. So even though individual states can't enact that permanent daylight saving time policy, it has to come from the federal level based on that law back in the 60s. Several have laws or resolutions, if the Federal Sunshine Protection Act is passed, to go to permanent daylight saving time, or if Congress approves their request and surrounding states also go to daylight saving time year-round. So finishing on some pros and cons of permanent daylight saving time, supporters cite the economic benefit of longer evening daylight hours as well as reduced seasonal depression, but critics argue that the change would force those who have to wake up early, including children and teenagers, to go to school and work in complete darkness, with those sunrises being pretty late into the morning between the 9 and 10 o'clock hour here in North Dakota. And some that study sleep also say it could interfere with natural circadian rhythms. But for permanent standard time, pros, having more daylight in the morning. Scientists say it's better for our sleep. Con is that you have those very early sunrises in the summer, since we're on the western side of the central time zone, especially for those folks in our region. But sunsets are not as late as well. And finishing on this interesting map that I came across is that people on the western side of a time zone generally don't go to bed until later than people on the eastern edges of time zone and get less sleep. So being on the western side of the time zone, like we are for most of our viewers, the western side of the central time zone, has its benefits of having the later daylight hours, but of course you can have less sleep, and studies have shown that might be detrimental to our health. So how do we balance all the laws that have to go into effect for permanent standard time or permanent daylight saving time? It remains to be seen how things play out.
All right.
Permanent daylight saving time, remove mountain time for North Dakota.
I
Oh,
like
did
that
I
idea.
just say that? Oh no. That's contentious.
Controversy continues.
Oh yeah.